For over 2 years now, we have been doing research on the ground in Iraq, interviewing numerous children who have been detained, some of them subsequently released. We've had access to some of these children in prison. And of course, we've spoken to hundreds of families who've had their loved ones, their sons, detained from checkpoints, from inside camps, and they've never heard from them again. So this report is really based on a wealth of research we've been doing over the last 2 years and a consistency among the stories of victims.
And how many children are we talking about exactly, in what age group? And can they be found guilty considering all the factors why they aided Daesh? I mean, they could have been forced.
So the numbers that we have are about 1,500 boys who are currently in detention. Some have already been prosecuted under counterterrorism laws, and some are awaiting that prosecution. Now, the boys that we've spoken to are not boys that are ever implicated in violent crimes. None of them have been prosecuted because they were said to be linked to an ISIS killing, a rape, any crime like that. Instead, these are really boys who, because they wanted to make money to let their families continue to survive living under ISIS, took up jobs at checkpoints, as cooks for military units, even as cleaners in ISIS-run buildings.
And the report says there was use of torture, the cases relied heavily on interrogations, and that included beatings and electrocution. So how did you find this out? I mean, what's the evidence exactly based on?
So the problem of torture and the use of torture as a common method in interrogations in Iraq is something unfortunately very well known and covered not only by many Human Rights Watch reports, but by the United Nations and many other groups. What we've seen is that unfortunately boys are not exempted from this treatment. Interrogators in Iraq carry out an investigation simply by trying to obtain a confession. That's the only skill set they usually deploy, and that encourages them to use abuse or whatever means they need to get that confession to allow for someone to be prosecuted. The boys told us about allegations of torture with such incredible consistency. Over 2 years, they've spoken about identical locations where the torture occurred, identical types of stress positions, electrocutions, and some of them do still have marks on their bodies from this abuse.
So, Belkis, now that you have this evidence and you've carried out this research for over the 2 years and have this report, what are you intending to do with it? I mean, have you been talking to the Iraqi government and the KRG to end this detention and persecution of these children?
Yes, for 2 years now, in multiple reports, we've been calling for the government to really put in place a different approach, to view children as victims of child soldier recruitment rather than as criminals. And this requires a change at the legislative level, and it requires a change really at the highest political level and a decision to treat these boys differently and exempt them from this treatment. We continue to make these calls through in meetings that we have with the authorities, through letters, through reports like this. We'll be back in Baghdad in a few weeks, and we will yet again be directly calling for the authorities to make that change that's necessary.